It's the College Football Show, Sunday edition. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We last left you about 2 o'clock in the morning. Make that about 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time. And here we are just about 8 hours later with more college football talk with you. This is the show, like most of them here at the Voice of College Football, where you take center stage, and it's your comments, your questions, your topics, your opinions, the teams that you want to talk about, the situations and scenarios you want to talk about that help me produce the show. Otherwise, I just sit here and talk about college football. I could do that for about 18 hours. I limit that to about an hour, depending on your interest / support. So appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to go through all the games. We're going to go through all the games. Central Michigan fans, you may not want to blink, but we will give your score from this weekend attention for about 1.5 seconds. But we will go through every score, and I will give my take on this past weekend, the games that we just witnessed Friday and Saturday in particular, and then, of course, how they pertain to the championship landscape of college football. I got a kick out of seeing this post. So I'm in the process of limiting my screen time. You don't want to be looking at screens too much. So that's really bad for business, but I'll just say it for your own mental health. You don't want to be looking at screens too much throughout your day. Now, if you're looking at our show, shoot, you don't need to look at me. You can just listen. But you can look at me and the callers. That's really not what I'm talking about regarding screen time. So I guess I'm doing okay for our business here. It's more about reading stupid stuff on social media that is not healthy for you. So I was checking my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter time, which unfortunately I've got to be on there to some degree because I run a business that's connected to social media. But I can certainly limit my time of scrolling through mindless crap. All right, Steve Hellwagon, thank you for the post of the day. If you can see that, I think that's self-explanatory. Steve, if you're not aware, writes for Bucknuts 247 Sports. So Bucknuts, Ohio State, there you should get it. The next morning, well, would you looky there? The sun came up today. So there you go. I thought that was a tremendous post right there. Great for Steve Hellwagon. Puts things in perspective. So if we want to stay on the more logical human level, yes, it's a football game played by 20-year-olds. Don't get too invested. At the same time, I understand your pain. I understand your pain. Believe me, I lived and died with this rivalry for years and years and years and years, but through various life experiences, then it becomes less and less important. I still want to win the game. It's still the most important game to me. It is funny, though, that Ohio State fans should not be jealous of Michigan. They're 7-5. So would you rather win this game and be 7-5, or would you rather lose this game and be 10-2? Look at it that way. And this is not to take away bragging rights from Michigan. They won the game 4 consecutive years. And they inexplicably won it on Saturday, even though did not surprise me at all. What I was witnessing was not surprising me. I don't think it should have taken place, but I'll say this, that if this was 1985, if this was 1995, even if this was 2001, i.e. Jim Tressel going 7-5, beating Michigan, and Michigan having a slightly better season that year, I would rather be, during those eras, for my entire life, I've always said, I'd rather beat Michigan and have a worse record, a worse season than Michigan, but win the game. Absolutely. I no longer feel that way. And this is not a conscious decision I made. It's not like I sat down and I don't make decisions like when it comes to sports fandom. I make logical decisions in life concerning finances and such things. But concerning sports, I just go with my heart, whatever my heart, like if I wake up on Monday and my heart tells me not to be an Ohio State fan anymore, then I won't be. If I start liking Kansas State, then I'll start liking them. And it's not a big deal. It's not like a logical decision to be a sports fan. It's not a logical decision to like any particular team, but I doubt that that's going to happen because it has yet to happen. I was born and bred. Well, I was born in Chicago. I was raised in Ohio, so I don't think that's ever going to leave me. But we're in a playoff era, so I hate losing that game. But my team's 10-2 and going to the playoffs. I would rather be 10-2 and going to the playoffs than be a miserable 7-5. But that's just me. I'm not saying everybody else should be like that. I would not have said that in 1985, 1995, or as recently as probably maybe even going into the 14 playoff era, because a 10-2 team would not make it. So, Steve, thank you so much for that post. I had a response to it. What did I say? So if you're going to go on the human level, best post of the day, life goes on, God is good. Okay, so if you want to go the human route and say, these are 20-year-olds playing with a piece of cowhide, it doesn't matter. You can go that route. If you want to stay on the football side and say, no, this is meaningful. Of course, it's meaningful to all of us, or we wouldn't be partaking in discussions like this. But if you want to go full football route, end all be all, I'll play along with you because I would have done the same thing for many years. Buckeye fans, I put in that tweet, that response back, that you still root for, arguably, I don't really think it's arguable, but anyway, arguably, it's not objectively the truth. So it's arguable, the most successful program in history. Would you rather have your history or somebody else's? Be thankful. All right. Let's go to the phone lines. And go. We got Michael on the line.
Hey, Mark. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I hope I'm not coming down with a cold.
I hope not either.
What happens?
I don't want anyone to come down with a cold.
That is a beautiful picture Steve took today. And people should take that for granted more often, man, because just because your team didn't win, you got to still be positive about the next day.
There you go. Sure.
But is this going to be the NFL's version of Black Monday today by any chance, or do you think that will happen starting tomorrow with coaches getting fired or stuff?
That's already been a thing for years and years and years. It's not going to start this year. It's been going on for years. We could go through every year. Coaches get fired the day after the season's over.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know if they called it Black Sunday or sometimes they might wait till Monday. That's what I was trying to say.
Nope. They usually don't wait. So we will see coaches get fired here in the next
few
day
hours
or so. I don't know how many.
Do you know which coaches might be getting the slips today? Or if you would venture a guess?
Well, I did more than venture a guess. I posted a video about a week ago of 10 or 11 coaches who could get fired. I don't think there's going to be as many coaches this year as there typically are. And I've gone through my reasoning on that. I just think that a lot of programs and teams that are underachieving just hired coaches. So Nebraska's not going to fire Matt Rule for just going 6-6. They might do that 2 years from now. And Wisconsin's not going to fire Luke Fickell, I don't believe, for going 5-7. They may do that a year or two from now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lincoln Riley's not going to get fired for going 7-5 this year, but 7-5 is not going to cut it maybe next year or the year after. So I think there's a lot of situations like that where coaches, Gus Malzahn, he's another situation where he left UCF. I had projected that he might get fired. He was on my list. But he just flat out left to go to Florida State to become the offensive coordinator. I just ironically thought of Auburn and Gus Malzahn's name came out of my mouth, but I was thinking of Hugh Freeze. I don't believe he's going to get fired yet, but after a second consecutive 5-7 season, he's setting himself up for 2025. So I think there are a lot of coaches that are going to get fired next year, but I think it's going to be on the light side this year, I think.
All right. Do you think Ryan Walters is going to be one of them, you think?
I would lean yes.
Okay. The thing I'm trying to figure out is what happened from last year to this year. Even though you didn't watch very much Purdue football this year, I'm still trying to figure out what happened. I mean, they was more competitive
I
last
don't
year,
know.
4-8, than they were this year.
Yeah. For as bad as they were last year, they were significantly better than they are this year. They're a train wreck.
Sure. No, I'm like I said, I was just trying to figure out. And did that surprise you about Malzahn yesterday, or do you think that was in the works?
I think that there may be just a situation at UCF that he just does not enjoy working there. He doesn't enjoy who he's working for. Or on top of that, he sees the writing on the wall anyway. He may have preempted his firing by making that move.
Okay. 'Cause I didn't know how he was doing. What he kind of doing all right around down there, or ever since he's been down there, it's been like going south.
Well, he did okay his first couple seasons. He was in the American Conference, and they were one of the better teams in the American Conference. I think he went 6-4 in the COVID year. Then he went, I want to say, 9-4, and then after that, they went to the Big 12 last season, and they had a bad record in the Big 12 last year, 3-6. I don't know what their record was this year. I think it was 2-7.
Okay. But one thing I was trying to figure out and stuff like that. So, what changes you might see in Ohio State next year? And another thing too, with Tulane losing, was that Thursday night to or Friday night to Memphis? Does Army host the American Championship now?
That's a great question. They would have the best record in the conference. Is that the way that works? Yeah, they started doing that several years ago. So they must be.
I know they said that Tulane won, they host, but I'm not sure how that works and stuff. So that's what I was trying to figure out. And stuff
yeah,
like
the team with the best record hosts.
But you're a diehard Ohio State fan, and I respect that and stuff. But when did this maybe start going? I mean, yeah, they had a good season, but do you think there might be? When do you think the internal strife might, if there was, started happening with Chip Kelly and Ryan Day?
How do we know that there's internal strife?
No, I'm just asking because you're more into it than I am.
Well, your question was, when did the internal strife start?
If it started, I guess, or was there internal strife and stuff?
How can I answer a question about when something started that we're speculating that it even started in the first place?
True.
I don't know. I don't even understand the question. I'm sorry, sir.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Make me look to see my dad or grandma was behind me. But no, because some people are saying Chip Kelly might not be coming back to Ohio State next year.
Oh, well, that could be the case.
I don't know. And I was asking because you're more into Ohio State, and you're the creme de la creme of college football. I figured you might know more about it stuff.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. I don't really have too many connections at Ohio State, more so than anywhere else. But I would think, based on yesterday's performance, that it should be called into question what Chip Kelly's doing there. Ryan Day did better running an offense against Michigan while being the head coach than Chip Kelly did yesterday. Chip Kelly had a bad day. There's no doubt about that. Will Howard had a bad day. Chip Kelly had a bad day. Ryan Day had a bad last couple minutes for sure in managing the clock and the timeouts. Yeah, it was just all around, outside of the defense, it was an all around collapse. Guess the wide receivers played okay. They caught the ball when it came to them.
Yeah.
The running backs had a bad day. Offensive line had a bad day.
Sure. No, I was doing all right. I'm gonna let you go because I'm gonna try to hopefully stuff like that. Get ready. Hopefully the Colts play better than they did last week, but we'll see. Mark, thanks so much. And are you gonna put on Twitter if there is any breaking news with coaches today, or is it gonna be like hit the alerts for on YouTube?
Well, I have always gone live when coaches got hired and fired, so I will try to keep up with that as best I can.
Okay, so, and if we hear anything, ourselves, just shoot you a tweet or something.
If you hear something,
yeah,
you're always welcome to hit me up.
All right, sounds good. See you, man.
Thank you, Michael.
Have a great day. God bless.
You feel better.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Bye. See you Tuesday.
All righty. Let's keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. Dr. Buckeyes here.
Yep.
Oh boy. Well,
Wow.
thanks for
Yeah.
showing up.
Yeah. Well, I'm here in the paint. To all the Scum fans out there, they're probably your largest fan base. I know they're out here to enjoy my disgust. And all right. I'm just going to get into it. I got to look at this on a lot of different. I needed to take some time to think about this because there's a lot of things that have to be talked about here. First of all, I don't know if I've ever seen a worst coaching performance, particularly from an offensive side in an Ohio State game in my life. That was coaching malpractice yesterday at its absolute worst, Mark. They let down the players.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't listen to your post-game show, so I didn't hear your opinion on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot out there already, hours and hours and hours and hours of what I had to say about this game. But if we're going to talk about, I believe that I think that Joel Klatt, who is rather reserved in his judgment and criticism of these teams while he's calling the game, which I respect. I'm not saying that he should be. I don't believe that he should be generally. He was pretty obviously puzzled by the offensive approach and not taking advantage of the disparity in talent on the outside. And so I would agree with that. I do think that you need to run the ball to a certain extent. You got to keep a defense honest. You got to do all those things. But I think that as the game wore on, and we already knew that Michigan's defensive front against Ohio State's offensive front was going to be their one big advantage in this game, that you basically decide we're going to throw the ball 70% of the time. So that was one issue. The other one was not the times that they decided to run the ball. Like,
yeah,
you can't give up on drives. Like, you can try to protect the game in the second quarter if you're down by a field goal or it's a tie game and it's the second quarter and you just figure, okay, we're in a bad position. Our offense isn't really clicking. It's 3rd and 8 in our own territory. Let's run the ball and punt. We got a great defense. Rely on them. Let's continue to play. But when there's 4 or 5 minutes left in a game, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever the time frame, and you're running a draw play on 3rd and 8, that's insane. Now, if that was at the Michigan 30, then I would have thought, okay, they're trying to get 3, 4, 5 yards to set up the 4th down call. But you're not doing that at your own 15-yard line. You're giving up on a draw. You're basically stating that we're going to give up all this time of possession. We're going to kick. Our punting game has not been effective. So we're going to lose the field position battle. And on top of that, we're bringing this down to like a 1-drive game. Like that. And we've got the best receiving core in the country. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. I mean, this was coaching malfeasance, malpractice at its worst. It really was. I mean, because there's a few things going on here. When they did run the ball in the first half, if you notice, the only 2 good runs they had was when they got wide. There was like a little pitch play where they ran to Junkins where he was able to get wide, and he had a nice little gain. The issue is they kept on trying to run the ball into the middle of the line, into those defensive tackles, into the strength of their football team when, they have a guard that's just moved to center, and another guard that's kind of struggled to block, and then a new guard in there, and another guard that's kind of struggled this season. And you try to run the ball at those defensive tackles. Does that make a lick of sense?
No. Football is a physical game, and I understand wanting to be the more physical, tougher team, but there are various ways you can win a football game.
Sure.
And sure, you have to be physical. You definitely have to be physical on defense, but you can do things to mask weaknesses along an offensive line, especially when you get playmakers everywhere you look. Yeah, it was inexplicable what they were trying to do, just jamming the ball. Not to deviate from this game, but it's connected to the same thought process. I didn't see much of Texas A&M, but I clicked it on because I was behind watching all these games throughout the day.
Right.
And Texas A&M's at the half-yard line. I don't know if you saw this.
Right.
at the end of the game. They're at the half-yard line with about 5 minutes left. It's 17-7. They're a half yard away from making it 17-14, and they tried 3 times the exact play. They right off tackle, right behind the center, and the Texas front was just stone cold, just stopped them.
Right.
So on 4th down, the decision is, do we kick a field goal to get within 1 score? So I understand the philosophy. I understand the approach that you may want to go that way, even though I don't agree with it. Kick the field goal, make it a 1-score game, and then stop them on defense, get the ball back. But then you obviously have to drive for a touchdown. Or do we go for the gusto right now, try to ram this in from the half-yard line, get to 17-14, and then we only have to kick a field goal to get to overtime, or we can win the game. So they called a timeout. So you'd think they're cooking up their best play possible, and they come out and they do the same exact thing. It's just a straight quarterback dive with the tailback, and he got stuffed for a 2-yard loss. That's what Ohio State was doing the entire game.
The obvious thing here, Mark, is that, and this leads to another question, is, and the complaint from a lot of the fan base is maybe he's too pass happy at times. What does he usually default to, when he needs to move the ball? He usually defaults to just throwing the football. You know what I mean? And it's so obvious with your receivers. Their secondary hasn't been good the entire year. Worse teams than us have thrown the football against that secondary. And on top of that, they're without their best corner. How is this not coaching malpractice? At its worst. It's so obvious. It's beyond obvious. Klatt was pointing it out. I know Ohio State fans have some problems with Joel Klatt right now, but kudos for pointing out the obvious in the game.
Yeah.
And, what it also begs the question of is who was really calling the plays. That's also the question. And I really feel that Chip Kelly should have been forced to answer questions after the game, Mark. If he's going to answer questions after the Oregon game, after the Oregon loss, why doesn't he answer questions after this loss? He should have to. I remember the loss 2 years ago when the defense got torched. Jim Knowles was forced to answer questions after that game. He did the press conference after that game. Why is Chip Kelly not answering questions after this game? It makes no sense.
That's a great point. I didn't know that he did or did not. I just saw Ryan Day and Will Howard. But the best rhythm and flow that this team showed was when they were forced to throw the ball at the end of the first half based on the time left on the clock. There was 90 seconds, so they had to throw the ball and get in rhythm and tempo, and boom.
And then the other worst thing about this game is they tried to hand Ohio State the game, Mark. They tried to literally hand them the game. They threw them 2 bad interceptions. Even after Howard threw his second interception, what did they do? They gave him the ball right back.
Yeah.
What did they do after? And I know the defense was getting tired. What did they do right after that? Oh, they decided to throw us an interception inside the 5-yard line when they're going in for a touchdown. They tried to give us the game.
Yeah, I know.
That makes it even worse, is that they tried to give you the game.
Yeah, there was a play at the 2 or 3 yard line when I thought that the call was very close, and they reviewed the call. And once they got the first down, which I highly questioned, but anyway, they got the first down. I thought, well,
yeah,
Ohio State's got a great rush defense, and I know that they've had all these goal line stands, but they're moving the ball enough that they're going to cram it in on 3 or 4 downs inside the 2. But no, lo and behold, they try to throw it.
And there were a couple of plays by the defense. Obviously, they missed a tackle on that last run by Mullings that set up the run. But a bottom line, too, that, the defense was then screwed by the coaching with the 2 timeouts coming out. You're coming out of a timeout, and you don't have your defense set up properly, and you have to take another timeout. How is that not coaching malpractice?
Yeah, and it also changes the offensive approach and makes it more of a fire drill when you get onto the field with 45 seconds left when you should have had more time.
Yet again, coaching malpractice. Yet again. let's talk larger picture, because we're going to have to. We obviously have to get there. We obviously have to get there. That you're right. This team is going to be in the playoff. It is a 12-team playoff. I do think, though, I'm wondering if this game also it poses some issues. And I've said all year, I do think this is a wide open field. I think this is not a great year of college football. I think there is more parity this year. First of all, that has been the consensus opinion of everybody across college football, not just me as an Ohio State fan, but everybody across college football, that this is, a more wide open year. And I do believe this team still has the talent, but a couple of things may have been exposed in this game about, where they're at. First of all, I do think, maybe if this team faces a really good defensive line, front seven, you still got to question it, maybe with this offensive line a little bit. And then also, remember 2 years ago, you were able to get a CJ Stroud to have the game of his life against Georgia, which gave you a chance to win that game. This does shake me, a little bit on Will Howard and his ability to deliver in a big game. Where's he at? And I know there was talk that, he had a concussion and things like that, although I don't think he was playing well before the concussion. Remember, the basic pick six that he gave them happened before that. So, I think that this does give me some pause about his ability in a playoff game too, and I think it should. And then most importantly, where is this team at mentally? And does anybody trust this coaching staff in a playoff game? Does anybody? Or should you trust this coaching staff in a playoff game?
Yeah, you're reminding everyone that they lost a game where they gave up one touchdown drive of 4 yards.
Right.
And so Will Howard, I like Will Howard. I like what comes out of his mouth. I think he's had a really good season, but these there are mistakes, and then there are painful, brutal, game-changing mistakes. And I even question the design of that play where he threw the picks, what was close to a pick six.
Yeah.
Because, okay, they're backed up in their own end, and so they try to run the ball the first two plays, and then they're caught at 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, something like that.
Yeah.
And okay. And the cornerback from Michigan, Jair Hill, I don't know if this is what he was processing, but it sure looked like it, that he's watching Carnell Tate. He's covering Carnell Tate, who runs kind of a lazy route, didn't really stick his foot in the ground and cut to the sideline.
That's fair.
Just kind of rounded it off and just kind of was out there. And you got to know as a cornerback the situation of the game, not just covering your guy and responding to his movements, but no, okay, is Ohio State going to leave Will Howard stand in the end zone and try to run double moves down the field, which is a low percentage pass in and of itself? Number two is going to expose the quarterback to a longer time standing in the pocket. No, there's the sticks. And this is where the ball's going to get thrown. This is exactly what he's doing. He's not, and if I give a double move and he burns me for 95 yards, so be it. That's not going to happen. That's exactly where they're throwing the ball. So to me, that's a bad play design. And why don't you run what you did a number of times, like run a couple receivers that are running rub routes and bring somebody underneath a Buka, somebody on a crossing route, do something a little bit more creative than just leave a guy on an island one-on-one and try to throw the ball way across the field.
Right. Well, I said it at the time. I mean, throwing an out pattern even towards the 50-yard line can be risky. Throwing it inside your own 10-yard line becomes even riskier. I mean, if there ever was a time, and I know this is, but I was even saying it at the time, so I'm not. This is not Monday morning stuff. If you're inside the 5-yard line, just go ahead and run a draw and punt. Just go ahead and run the draw and punt. You know that you're still in an okay place because it's 3-0. The game is still early. You know your defense has played pretty well. They just got you a goal line stand, by the way, before he threw that interception. I mean, if there was ever a time to just run your draw, run your screen, whether it be draw to the running back or draw with the quarterback, it was that time. I mean, just bottom line, don't get cute inside your own 5-yard line, and they did. Again, coaching malpractice. I did want to get to kind of also the grand picture here too, Mark, and the larger picture about this coach, this coaching staff, and everything moving forward. I don't know if this is the worst Ohio State law. It's in the running, and I get your argument about the 12-team playoff being out there, and it is still out there, and that's a fair point. However, I just think when you look at the roster, you look at the disparity between the two teams and talent, particularly this year, the last 3 years, to give them some flowers. I mean, they would even admit they had better football teams the last 3 years than they had this year, so they weren't as good this year, obviously, as they were the last 3 years. So that disparity, the game being at home, all of that, I mean, it is reminiscent of an era that we watched before, Mark. It's called the 1990s. And the only thing that I can compare to this is maybe 1996 on a scale. And by the way, Steve Hellwagon, I was listening to him and the folks over at Bucknuts. You know what the score of that game was, don't you?
It was 1 point off.
Yeah, 13-9. The Sean Springs slipped game.
Yep.
And there was also coaching malpractice in that game. It was eerily similar. An unranked team. See, this is the thing, Mark. When you have this record against, you're losing to good opponents, you can always say, well, at least we're losing to good football teams. This is an unranked football team on your home field.
But Ryan Day hasn't done that.
Right.
To his credit, he has not lost to bad football teams. He's lost to the elite.
Well, what I'm saying is this is the thing that may tip the scale. This is the thing that may finally tip the scale.
Yeah, but if that's not Michigan, then it's Iowa or Washington or somebody else that's...
Right, Mark, but you lived in Northeastern Ohio for a good portion of your life, Mark.
Well, what I'm saying is that everybody loses to marginal football teams at some point.
Right.
So if this is not Michigan, then this is something that Ryan Day doesn't do. He doesn't lose to non-elite football teams. So if this wasn't Michigan, then it would be a bad loss and move on.
But Mark, it also leads to another question. But if now, when? But if now, when for him?
When to get rid of him?
No, when is he going to win this game? If he's not going to win it in a year like this, when will he win it?
Well, it's always not logical when you win or don't win. Was it logical? Was it logical after 2019 and 2020, the state of the Michigan football program and the state of the Ohio State football program, that Jim Harbaugh was going to beat Ohio State the next year? That was an Ohio State team coming off a national championship game appearance, and then the previous year coming off maybe its best team since winning a national championship 10 years ago. And Michigan's coming off a disaster. So
listen, I didn't think that the streak would last for forever. I never did. I thought eventually they would get a win. I'm not going to be that crazy about it. What I will say is this. And I'm going to ask you this question because I think we are at the John Cooper point here. I think yesterday was a John Cooper kind of loss. I mean, if this harkens me back to 1996, then what am I saying here, Mark? I guess my question to you is this. Was there also a point too with Cooper? And if I could go Mark Cooper and we go back, if we go back with Mark Rogers and the time warp machine back to the 90s, was there a point with you when you said, as an Ohio State fan, I'm done with this guy?
No. Yes.
There had to be a season when Mark Rogers was saying out loud to friends and family members, it's time for Ohio State to cut ties with John Cooper.
So I wasn't on board with the John Cooper hire to begin with. I wasn't crazy about it, didn't really like it, but of course we had far less information on these guys, and I just knew he beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. He's had a nice little stay there. Okay, let's give him a shot. I wasn't crazy about the hire. I didn't really approve of it, but it was fine. I was going to give him a chance, and obviously things started off horribly.
Right.
And they got better against everybody else, but against Michigan. So the first time that I raised my eyebrow, so I didn't like losing to Michigan all those times, but they had an inferior team and program until 1993.
Right.
And then when you've got a better team and you lose 28-0, okay,
Right.
what's wrong? Well, they win the next year. And then 1995, the same thing happens again. But they're much like now, they're winning too much to really, it's difficult for me to go back almost 30 years and recall my psyche.
I know.
Although it wasn't, I losing to Michigan was the worst thing in the world to me. But they had such a good year in 1998.
Yeah.
I thought in addition to the Michigan game that he also botched the quarterback situation in 1996 and 97, that contributed to them not being able to get over the hump, that he couldn't make a decision on what kind of offense he wanted to run and with which style quarterback, and that Joe Germain should have been the quarterback during that entire 2-year time. And then they go into 1998. And while that was hugely disappointing because they did have the best team in the country,
Yeah.
it's hard to fire a coach who goes 11-1 and
Right.
finishes number 2 in the country. So really into the 1999 season is when I said, okay, this program's starting to stagnate and go the wrong way. And he missed his window of opportunity and he bungled away the superior teams a number of times. So I'm done with him now for sure within that 1999 season.
Well, that's why I said his career is in 3 parts, Mark. It's 88 to 92 when he never wins more than 8 games and never wins a bowl game. And then 93 to 98, his best run of football, where he wins 10 or more games 5 times in 6 years, wins a Rose Bowl and a Sugar Bowl, and has 2 number 2 finishes. And then now, I agree with you. He was not going to be fired after 98. That's why I say the third part of his career is 99 to 2000, his last 2 years, which did get him fired.
Yeah.
So the question is how long do you wait here? Because the other thing with this coach that we've hired here is, at least Cooper, you're right. You had a track record. You had hired a guy that already coached at Tulsa. You hired a guy that already coached at Arizona State. You hired a guy right here, and whether it's soft, born on third base, whatever term you want to use, go ahead. The term I'm using is they hired a guy that was inexperienced, that had never been a head coach before, and they asked it to be on-the-job training. And Ohio State is not a place to do on-the-job training, Mark. I mean, what did Urban, what did Saban, what did all the coaches do? They came up through the MAC, they cut their teeth there, then they kind of went to mid-level program before they stepped up to the big boys. There's a progression here to this. And that's what they did. They hired an inexperienced coach, and they put him in this spot, and they thought because Urban left him the program with where it was at, that everything would just continue to move along at this pace. And I'm just saying, we may have seen a tipping point here.
I understand your point about hiring an inexperienced coach, and I had those reservations as well. And when you hire an experienced coach, yes, you know that at least he can run a big time college football program. Well, Ryan Day can run a big time college football program. They're not falling apart. They could be going 7-5 like their rival. They could be going the route of all sorts of different. Hang on just a second. Over the like a lot of other programs across the country that have they could be Texas. Look at how awful Texas has been for the last 15 years. Texas has just as much of a proud football history and his highest standards, and they slugged through 5-7, 7-5 back and forth for almost 15 years. Like Ohio State just doesn't put up with their. Like we're not putting up with 7-5 teams, 5-7 teams. We're talking about teams that are that close to winning a national championship. And hang on just a second. When you talk about the experience factor, you have to take into consideration. It's easy to say that now, and I raised that point as well, that should be a consideration. But Kirby Smart, no experience. Dabo Sweeney, no experience. Lincoln Riley, no experience. David Shaw, no experience. There's all sorts of guys you can raise who are highly successful that had zero head coaching experience.
Well, go over to the USC chat. See how they're feeling about Lincoln Riley today, right now. By the way,
Well, I'm talking about Lincoln. No, he's got experience at USC. I'm talking about he got hired in the same type situation at Oklahoma and went 55-10 and went to the playoffs about every year.
I'm just saying he's a coach in peril right now too, probably.
Sure.
But yeah. Oh, I mean, okay.
They hired an experienced coach.
No,
USC did.
I understand that, Mark, but the point being is still the point being. People are worrying about the program going backwards or them losing recruits or anything like that. When has this program ever been devoid of talent, Mark? When has it been devoid of talent? John, I mentioned that period starting in 1993 with John Cooper. That's basically a 30-some-year run of a program that's never been devoid of talent. Okay,
right.
Where they've been pumping out players to the NFL, and I keep watching the NFL every week and seeing Ohio State names across the screen, Mark. It's like a thing. And, there comes a point where I'm not saying the program, and I had this conversation during the Cooper years. I said that in some ways, I had said, well, Cooper's a great recruiter. I said, well, doesn't Ohio State recruit itself? I mean, isn't it, you still have a very good state to recruit football from. You still have a national brand to where you can go out throughout this country and get recruits that want to come to this university because they see these guys playing in the NFL on Sunday. And my point being is for all these people that think this thing gets blown up and the school will never get good players if they hire another coach, please, I beg to differ. The track record does not say that, by the way.
So I said it many times yesterday, both after the game. We went live like 2.5 hours right after the game, and then another 2-3 hours last night, that I have no issue with them firing Ryan Day. First of all, let's not do it before the season ends.
Okay.
Why would we? I had some clown on here last night. He didn't speak to me directly, but he was in the chat basically saying, Mark, hang it up. There is zero chance that they can win another football game this year. And I just was begging for mercy that I could be allowed to just hope and wish that I could just take that 1% chance of hope that Ohio State could possibly stay in a game with Tennessee or whoever, and that just give me that one little hope, just grant me that one little hope, that one little wish that they could possibly just stay in a game with mighty Tennessee or Notre Dame or Penn State or whoever they get matched up against.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a joke when people say, oh, give up on your season. Why give up on the season? We haven't seen Georgia look vulnerable, Alabama look vulnerable. Let's go through every team that's going to be in the playoff look vulnerable. So like Ohio State's going to have a fighting chance. I'm not predicting a national championship. I'm just saying they have as good a shot as anybody else that's going to have to play 4 games to get through the bracket. And 2 years ago, after they lost to Michigan, first of all, I thought they were out of the playoff, but then they got some help from USC.
Right.
And then once they
Utah,
did, I thought,
Utah beat USC.
Yeah. So then my thought was, wow, they're playing the best team in the country, the defending national champions, a team that's just got it all buttoned up. And wow, what is their psyche? What is Ohio State's psyche after getting trampled in the fourth quarter by Michigan, who of course got trampled the year before by Georgia? How can they possibly play with this team? This might be ugly. I know from a talent standpoint, they can play with them, but where in the world are their heads? How is Ryan Day going to possibly get them off the mat to play this game? And then within a couple of weeks, and as we got closer to the game, I gained more confidence for whatever reason and thought it was going to be a great game. And obviously they played Georgia toe to toe. So people say, how can they possibly recover from this? Well, they have to. They did it 2 years ago. They may have done it last year had they been given the opportunity. And here we go. We don't know.
Okay. So,
I'm not firing a coach in the middle of the season.
No, I get it. I think he should be able to coach the playoff. But there's got to be a thing here to this, Mark. There's got to be an end game to this. Okay. To that point, what do you think? They're going to be a 6, 7 seed, something like that?
Yeah.
And probably a 7 seed, maybe an 8 seed. 7 or 8 seed obviously get you a home playoff game.
Yeah.
So, he did lose to Missouri in a bowl game last year, by the way, Mark. Ohio State's track record against the SEC has not been good over the years. I don't know if you've heard that. You've done videos and tapes about it.
And that's not just Ryan Day.
That's true. That's what I'm saying. Well, he lost. He kind of added to that the last couple times too, by the way, with losses there. So, what's the end game here, Mark? What's the end game? Does he have to get to here? Does he have to get to there? What's the Mark Rogers view from like 5,000, whatever, 30,000 feet or what have you?
So when Mark Richt got fired at Georgia, and I'll highlight Mark Richt more than Les Miles, but I said the same about both of them. And some people were saying, well, they're doing a good job. Why'd they get fired? Well, yeah, they're really good coaches, especially Mark Richt. Les Miles obviously had his issues, and it was easy to pick on Les Miles because he botched games. But Mark Richt, it was more about just why can't he get over the hump? And my viewpoint was, if these guys just had regular standards, normal standards, whether in the football industry or they were selling insurance or something, then they were just really good at their jobs and they shouldn't get fired. But they get paid at an elite level. They get paid top 5 money to produce those kind of results. So Ryan Day gets paid, and the expectations are, and he knows them as well as anyone, to win championships. Well, we're working on 6 seasons and he's not winning championships. So I am okay with them firing him if he doesn't win the national championship this year. I will not lose one minute second of sleep if they fire him the day that they lose to whomever in the playoffs. I will say, okay, I understand that decision. I will also not have an issue if they keep him. I would have no issue if they kept him. Well, because they're recruiting top 3 players in classes in the country and doing all the things, and they continue to knock on the door. And Tom Osborne, did he get fired? Did Bobby Bowden get fired for not winning championships? No, they didn't get fired. Did they get fired?
Well, Mark, first of all, Tom Osborne was kind of winning some of his rivalry games. He had like a bad bowl record where he
had a pretty bad record against Oklahoma. Was he?
Well,
no, he was not getting fired.
But he was able to beat Oklahoma every now and then. He wasn't already,
He started in 1973. He didn't win a national championship till 1994.
I agree.
He was given 21 years to win a national championship. Bobby Bowden, sure, he didn't take over an Ohio State program. Florida State was nothing. So he built the program. But once he got them to what they were, 1978, 79, it took him 15 years to win a national championship.
Yeah, but Mark, there's a point here to where you're saying that maybe this guy has taken you as far as he can take you. And maybe he cannot win the most important game.
Pointing out the same could have been said about Tom Osborne. Let's not don't make a mistake about it. If we jettisoned ourselves back to 1985 for Tom Osborne or 1990 for Bobby Bowden, we could say that dude's not getting it done. He has elevated this program. He's doing a great job 90% of the time, but he's not winning the big games. Get rid of him.
Well, first of all, Bobby Bowden took a program that was on a scrap heap from nowhere, Mark.
But Ryan Day elevated them. That was 1978 when he finished in the top 5. So from 1978 to 93, he didn't win the big game. He didn't win the national championship.
But you clearly stated when Ryan Day took over this program, this was a top three program in the country.
Yes.
Period. From Urban Meyer.
Yes.
A top 3 program in the country.
Yes.
It was only Alabama and Clemson that were at a higher level at that particular period of time. Yes. And there was still maybe some debate. They could have at least been 2.
Yes.
Mark,
he's been gifted.
You know what I mean? The question is, are you on the ascent or are you on the descent? That's going to become the question. And I think we're getting to a tipping point on that, my friend. I think we are getting to a tipping point on that.
Again, I'm just bringing up Tom Osborne and Bobby Bowden and saying that you could have said the same thing about them for year after year after year after year after year, and neither one got fired, and it worked out well. I'll also say that you also have to live with who else you hire and what they're going to be able to deliver.
I,
Just know that it's not automatic that this team goes 11-1 every year. And they've gone 11-1. Basically, that's the average record for this team for 20 plus years.
right.
11-1. So that's like, I think Ohio State fans start with that as a floor and think this is just given to us. Like, we're entitled to go 11-1.
No.
And then the coach has to deliver more than that. This program could be 8-4-7-5. They could become Texas for 15 years. It can happen.
Mark, listen. This program has been about this sport is about talent acquisition. And I just illustrated since 1993, Ohio State has not had a hard time with acquiring talent. And even John Cooper, in his moronic ways, found a way to win 10 or more games 5 times in 6 years and have 2 number 2 national finishes in 96 and 98 and still probably put Ohio State, like in Ohio State, I mentioned Urban had them at a top 3 level. By like the late 90s, you could say that Cooper may have had Ohio State at close to that level. Where would you say Ohio State was at in 1998 as a program? Probably top 3 or 4 level.
Yeah, Nebraska and Florida State were still slightly higher.
Right.
They were right there. Sure.
So there you go. There you go. It's not.
I'm not saying that they can't hire a coach that's going to get them over the hump. And of course, they're Ohio State. They've got all the talent in the world and should continue to acquire that and need to be coached better. I'm just saying, I think there's an entitlement out there among Ohio State fans that they just assume that there's a floor of like 11-1, and then the coach has to pull through with the rest of it. And that's not assumed. They could turn into the Penn State of the 2000s very quickly.
That was an aged coach, Mark, who's was kind of getting a little bit along in years. By the way,
they could turn into the USC of the post Pete Carroll era.
Okay,
and it's a tougher conference.
No, I agree. It is a more difficult conference. We are living in an NIL world, transfer portal. You have to work all those things, and I think that's the other things that maybe you think about in this whole decision. And I'm not going to just throw that aside, and not to say that we don't live in a different college football world. And I think that that's the other thing too. I think that that's why a lot of the Ohio State fans, the most obvious choice would be a Mike Vrabel. That's like the number one name that comes out, maybe Urban Meyer, that comes out of people's mouths. But do they want to come back to this college football world as we know it nowadays and coach in this college football world? Believe you me, I'm very realistic about that. But I just think that we can find a guy that can do this job better than Ryan Day. That's all I'm saying.
If they make the change and we're sitting here 5 years from now and they've been 9-3, 9-3, 10-2, 9-3, 10-2, and losing in the first or second round of the playoffs, I'm not going to be sitting here folding my arms saying I told you so, because I didn't tell you so. I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, don't assume. Ohio State fan out there, do not assume that like 11-1 is this entitlement every year.
I'm not saying it's entitlement, Mark. I'm just saying with the track record that they have had, okay? And I understand it's a tougher conference, a different college football world, but the different college football world can also help you in other ways too. But the question is, do you have to have the right coach to manipulate it and work the system as it is, and be good at managing the roster and doing things like that, more so than they did in the 90s or early 2000s. This is tough, Mark. I'm sorry. This is just a difficult day, and don't
be sorry about anything. It's a good debate, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just pointing out facts of other comparisons that I think should be considered.
That Bobby Bowden comparison is a little bit of apples to bowling balls. Let's be fair, Mark. Florida State's starting point in the late 70s, early 80s was far different than Ohio State's starting point for Ryan Day in 2019.
I clearly stated when I brought up Bobby Bowden that his first year at Florida State, they were a disaster. He built that program, much like Howard Schnellenberger built that program. But it only took him 3 years, and by 1979, 1980, they were going to Orange Bowls and finishing in the top 3 or 4 in the country.
I
So
agree.
from that time on,
Yeah.
whether
No,
he's built the program or it's been given to him, that's where he's at. And then he was not winning the right game, and somebody was getting in his way, usually Miami, or somebody was getting in his way for 15 years.
Yeah, he couldn't win the state of Florida. I had those missed field goal games against Miami. I remember those.
Sure.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult.
Somebody else had a missed field goal game too.
Yeah, let's not talk about missed field goals after yesterday, by the way. I mean, how can this program not find a kicker, by the way? How can this program not find – they spend all this NIL dough, and they can't find a freaking kicker.
When you talk about –
this is just pathetic.
I don't even know how to approach this part of the issue.
I see the glee on all the scum fans probably in the chat right now, by the way.
Did this and this is one of the reasons why I thought an upset was possible. I said this very clearly. They've got one of the best kickers in the country. And I will note that I put his name on my ballot for the Football Writers Association first team All-American kicker before this game. Sorry to do that. But when you talk about how much is this just football players get on a field and they hit each other and somebody's better that day versus did a team freeze? Did a team choke? Did they white knuckle it? All that. Man, when a kicker's 14 for 14 inside 40 yards in his career and then he misses 2 chip shots.
Yeah.
That doesn't look good.
Maybe it just tells you it's not going to be your day. Well, there's always the NFL. I can watch the Browns.
Jameis Winston at least makes it entertaining.
Yeah, slightly better than Deshaun Watson, I guess.
Are they going to keep him around? Is he going to be like a long-term answer?
Well, I mean, it's the tough thing, and I think we kind of talk about this on the college. It mirrors this. I don't think this is a great college quarterback class. I mean, some people have maybe more confidence in Cam Ward than I do, or translating to an NFL quarterback, or for that matter, Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur in the right place can be a really good quarterback, possibly, but I don't know. I mean, it's just not a great quarterback class, so they may need to keep him. I think they've got a lot of people that are going to be auditioning for their jobs next year. So. All right, Mark. Well, I'm going to try and enjoy this Sunday as best I can.
Well, it was good to hear from you.
Yeah. Well,
you always bring great insight. And again, I don't disagree with you necessarily. I'm just bringing up alternative points, counterpoints.
Well, yeah, I know you got to play the devil's advocate, but well, it's going to be an interesting next few weeks for Ohio State. We'll see the playoff and who they draw. So, all right, Mark, you have yourself a great day.
All right, David, you as well. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Out time is 1 p.m. Eastern time, folks. So if you want to give me a call, if you also want to follow me on Twitter, if that's what we want to call it, X. I should actually go the X route because I'm a big proponent of what Elon Musk has done with the platform. He has certainly rid it. What would be the possible grammatical? He has certainly gotten rid of, I'll say, all sorts of crap on there in regards to opening up free speech and not suppressing people. So I'm in favor of that. I can't say I know a whole lot about the man other than that, but he has done a great job in X. But anyway, so I don't like the name of it. Twitter just rolls off your tongue, of course. Calling something X, people don't know what you're talking about. Well, they do now. But so you can follow me on X. And there it is right there. And you'll get all sorts of, whatever I decide. It could be a college football comment like 16 times in a row. And then it could be a comment about social injustices or whatever I feel like talking about. So get all sorts of things from what I hope is a biblical worldview. And if it's not, certainly interact with me, engage with me, and correct me on that, because that's what I want it to be. So you can follow me on X. Again, I got booted from my own account on the Voice of College Football. So I had about 6,000 6,000 followers on my main account, but we turned that into the business account, the official Voice of College Football account. So I had to start my own Twitter there. So took a picture with my daughter and I there at the beach a couple months ago. There we are. That's not us. We took the picture, and there you go. So if you have any interest in that, I will see on Twitter, and we can interact there. Let's take the next call. We got Rob showing up. Rob, what's going on today?
Hey, good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Hey, I just thought I wanted to point this out because I forgot to bring it up last night. I feel bad for Texas A&M because they started their year with a 10-point loss at home and ended their season with a 10-point loss at home, and that brought them full circle to Infinity War style 8-4. Texas A&M, I believe now in the curse. I wasn't a believer at first, but I think they're just cursed to go 8-4 for the for the remainder of their time. Yeah, it's
you talk about a program. They're perfect example. Ohio State fans. Yeah, there is a program that puts just as much money, resources, time, effort, passion. 105,000 people in the stands. When do they ever go 11-1? Never. They don't. 10-2. Johnny Manziel, one time. Have they gone 10-2 since then? No. The COVID year, they went 9-1. Big deal. Yeah, they are relegated to 8-4 status just over and over and over and over, regardless of who the coach is.
Yeah, I feel bad for them, man. I think they got a great fan base and they deserve, but they're always supporting them. I mean, to me, Texas A&M just hasn't been the same since they lost Le'Veon Moss. And I know, like, every team goes through injuries. Heck, Notre Dame's got more than most, but we all struggle, especially at this point in the season, with injuries. I mean, Ohio State's another one with their offensive line issues. But man, I don't know if any team. There's not many teams out there that took a bigger blow for the loss of one player than A&M without Le'Veon Moss, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good debate, possibly.
And they just couldn't do anything offensively. And granted, a lot of that props to Texas. Their defense played like world beaters last night. I mean, if Texas plays that style of defense, going forward in the playoffs and the SEC championship game, they got a real shot to win it all. I mean, their offense didn't look great, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I thought, again, I mentioned last night my predictions didn't go great. I mean, I predicted Notre Dame would win, but there wasn't I thought A&M would win. I mean, Georgia, I thought Georgia would win. I mean, I had a couple of hits. I thought Miami was going to win. They lost to Syracuse, so yeah, my picks were a little all over the place yesterday.
Yeah, I did not total up my record, but I was having a really good day. I think I hit my first 7 in a row.
Nice.
But I'm due for some good days. I've had my worst season predicting ever. But the last 2 weekends, I've been on a roll.
You know what? I got to say, I love the chaos of this college season. It's been crazy. I mean, I remember I was at the amusement park with my family on the Fright Fest, and that's when Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, and I just kept checking the score. I'm like, there's no way Alabama's going to actually lose to Vanderbilt. So I kept checking the scores. We're going around, and yeah, finally, sure enough, Vandy beat Alabama. That was like one of the big turning points of the year. That's like kind of when the chaos, in my opinion, started. I mean, if you don't include Notre Dame losing week 2 to NIU, that was pretty chaotic. But yeah, it's been a fun year. So
it has been. Yeah, I did not believe or buy into that Vandy score either until about 5 minutes left. And I thought this may actually happen. And even if it doesn't, I want to see Alabama score the game-winning touchdown if they can pull it off. And so I watched the end of that game.
Yeah, that was insane. Props to Vandy, man. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them get a little streak going there in the SEC. That'd be kind of funny. Yeah, I had a question mark. It's got nothing to do with rivalries necessarily, but I always thought that my favorite uniforms that aren't part of my team, for some reason, I just love Florida's uniforms, and I love Clemson's purple when they wear the purple.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get what's your favorite non-Ohio State uniform?
Oh man, this is an easy one. I say this all the time. UCLA.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they got a good one too.
I love UCLA's uniforms. I love their color scheme. I love when they get on the field with USC. I think that's the best looking game in college football, especially when they play at the Rose Bowl. They both have their home uniforms on, much like Notre Dame and USC. Now, if you showed that to just a person who enjoys aesthetics and colors, they wouldn't necessarily see it because we see it through the eyes of college football fans and history and tradition too. So I recognize that. But yeah, I think UCLA's got the best uniforms in the sport outside of course, Ohio State. And that's, of course, a biased opinion. And that's the one biased opinion that I will not let go of, that I have no issue with Penn State fans saying we get the best uniform in college football. Great. Sure. That's your uniform. That's the one that's fine.
I got nothing against Penn State, Mark, but I can't stand their uniforms. Well, you know what? Notre Dame yesterday, and I said this again, if they ever wear those all-white uniforms again, they deserve to lose because that just reminded me of Penn State's uniforms, and ugly.
It took me about 3 plays when I turned on the Notre Dame game to figure out what was wrong with the scene. It took me about 3 years to figure out that they had white pants on.
Yeah, stop wearing the white pants, man. It's disgusting. Anyway.
I typically like, not for them, because I want to see them wearing their traditional uniforms, but I do like white on white. I like a full white uniform.
Yeah,
Alabama wears a full white uniform. So does Penn State.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I don't know. It's just I just don't. I hate seeing those white pants. And every time they wear the white pants this year, it's like one of their worst games. So it's like, come on, guys, stop wearing those.
Now it's funny because, and it all depends on how old you are to a certain extent too, because like Michigan now wears white pants when they're on the road, but for the longest time, from the time I grew up, they wore yellow pants, or I guess it would technically be maize pants.
Mm-hmm.
And so that when they first trotted out with these white uniforms about 6-7 years ago, sometime during Harbaugh's run, I thought, well, that doesn't look right. But then I later discovered, only a couple years before I became a fan, they wore white pants. So they actually were going back to a more traditional look than what I remembered.
Yeah, for me, I'm definitely a fan of the yellow pants or the maize pants for Michigan. Oh, that's another thing. I know they're I love Michigan's helmets. I think they got one of the coolest helmets in the sport.
I think they're horrible.
Well, yeah, I would imagine. Of course, my favorite helmet is Notre Dame's, of course, but sure. Little homer bias there.
Yeah, I like Notre Dame's helmets too. I got a Notre Dame helmet back here, and it doesn't even look like a Notre Dame helmet. It could be mistaken for an Army or a Navy helmet, but that was the Notre Dame purchase that I made, or somebody made for me, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah.
When we start collecting helmets again, I'll up my game on Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, when their actual helmets are great. It looked like Colorado's trying to emulate that a little bit recently with their helmets, trying to put a little more, gaudiness on them, especially the face masks. They got like the gold face masks now. I mean, it's a cool look. I mean, I gotta come clean, Mark. I was a doubter on Deion Sanders, and I think part of that, not because I dislike the guy. I mean, I'm not one of those people that just hates Deion because they hate Deion. I was so tired of the narrative last year. Oh, Colorado's going to be the best team ever, and they just sucked, right? And that was one of the reasons why I had a disdain for Colorado. But this year, he's actually legit turned them around, and they're a pretty, legit to take a team like that won one game, sure, and go 9-3 this year. I got to give flowers to Deion, man. He's done a great job there.
I certainly agree. I do.
Yep. So, anyways, I got one more question, and I'll let you go, Mark. What's the game in the championship week that you're looking forward to the most? You got Army Tulane, UNLV versus Boise, Iowa State versus Arizona State, obviously Texas, Georgia, Penn State, Oregon, and Clemson, SMU.
So I like them all. and I want to watch them all. And that may seem like an obvious comment because I like to watch all of college football. But so, for example, last year, Texas and Oklahoma State, even though I watched the game, did not interest me that much because I thought Texas would wipe the field with them, and they did. And so it was boring. But if I had to put these in order, I am curious to see if Penn State can play at Oregon's level. I want to see the disparity between those two teams. I'm curious about that. Texas and Georgia are in the playoff. Well, Oregon and Penn State are in the playoff. SMU and Clemson are playing for their lives. That makes that intriguing. And so are Arizona State and Iowa State. So, but just from a football standpoint, I want to see Penn State and Oregon match up.
Yeah, that would be a great litmus test for them. And look, I think Penn State, if they play their absolute A game, they can definitely hang in there with Oregon. But that's definitely one of those ones where I have Oregon. If I'm just picking one to win, yeah, I think Oregon's going to take it. I'm definitely also interested, like you said. I mean, Georgia and Texas are in the playoffs, but I want to see if Texas can man up and get make it a closer game this time, because they got their doors blown off last time against Georgia, and Georgia hasn't really looked as good since that game. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the rematch there.
That is a great idea for a video that I actually did years ago, and maybe I'll revamp it here. What happens in rematches? Because I think the rematch in college football is actually unique, and I think it's actually more valid than a lot of other things that we could quantify, because there are only rematches among good teams. So Ohio State doesn't play Rutgers twice just out of happenstance. Only good teams that are very like-seeded play twice. And so is there any kind of revenge factor, or just we match up? We can fix our problems based on the game tape and what do they do, so we can counter what we did wrong, and therefore there's an advantage to the team that lost the first matchup. It's a theory. I don't know if it's completely true.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing on that game is going to be the quarterback play. I mean, last time Georgia won in spite of Carson Beck, because I think he threw 3 interceptions that game.
Yeah.
And Texas, Quinn Ewers just looked terrible for large stretches of that game. So maybe if Quinn has got the butterflies out of his stomach and he's able to play at a higher level this time, and it'll be interesting to see, because, I mean, if Quinn Ewers elevates his game in that game, but also Carson Beck does, maybe the net result is the same. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, either way, Beck's going to need to play good, or else I don't see Georgia winning the rematch. But anyways,
yeah,
I don't know.
I think Texas has an advantage here. I think they're playing better football, and I think Texas right now is just a slightly better football team. And I picked Georgia when everybody was down on Georgia, and they just lost to Alabama, looked bad against Kentucky, and they were a 5-point underdog at Texas. I picked Georgia to win that game, but I'm leaning Texas.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, Mark, by the smallest margin.
Sure.
It's the smallest margin. Anyways, I'm gonna let you go. I know you probably got other callers. Always great talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Have a good day.
Yep. You too.
All right. We also have on the line, we've got Nick showing up today. Nick, how's it going here at the Voice of College Football?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark, as you could probably imagine. How are you?
Well, I had a Nick call me last night that was not you, so I didn't know who was calling me necessarily.
Okay.
It looked exactly the same. It was a purple N, Nick, and he called, and I forget who he rooted for.
Yeah, that wasn't me. But anyway, so I wanted to, obviously, I've watched a portion of your post-game reaction, not the whole thing, but I got to be honest, yesterday when I was watching the game, my jaw was on the floor watching that. And I wanted to see, at what point in that game did you start to get antsy if you did at all? Like, at what point in that game were you like, okay, Michigan could actually win this thing? Because, and the reason why I ask is because your analysis of it with Steve was much more, you were much more of the mind that it could very well be a close game, and you called it with the offensive line and defensive line. But I still don't think you ultimately, like, I'm assuming you
I
ultimately,
picked Ohio State to win the game.
yeah.
I picked Ohio State to win the game, but I more quickly took 20 points as a point spread because I thought that was a ridiculous line. No, I'm not saying I actually went out and bet the game. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't bet against Ohio State. I wouldn't bet. I haven't bet in 7 or 8 years. I don't know if I'll ever place a bet again. I don't. It interests me, but I don't really care one way or the other. But I predict the games against the spread, and I took Michigan without blinking. 20.5 points. Yeah, Michigan. Take that. Thought that was a ridiculous point spread. And yes, you're right. I talked about a defensive line can muck up a game plan, can really wreck a game. All you have to do is watch Ohio State play Nebraska. They almost lost to a much inferior team just because they couldn't block. Now, this was different in that Will Howard had time to throw, but there's a punting difference. There's a place kicking difference. I noted those before the game. And there's a psychological edge that we assume. Many assume. And I don't know if that's the case or not. Who knows?
I think you can go farther than that. I think yesterday the underlying theme was psychological. When you look at the amount of mistakes, and just wild things that were happening in that game. I mean, Michigan has been making mistakes. You know, Davis Warren has been throwing picks all year, but like, just the
not recently.
Yeah, and just the fashion of that play, that trick play, and just how that happened. And it was such a good play by Jack Sawyer, but it was such a bad throw. I mean, like middle school, like worse than that. And at that time in the game, and then you're thinking the momentum flips, and then Ryan Day, no one yells down to him on his headset. I understand you're counting maybe too many men on the field, if that's what it was, to not call that second timeout again, which gives Michigan the first and goal, which I think ultimately that's probably what cost them the game. But yeah, were you? How was your perspective while you were watching it? Like, I'm assuming the game went completely different. Like, were you shocked? Were you not surprised? Or was it just kind of like a fluctuation of emotions?
No, it's a great question, because I wrestle between being unbiased and not surprised versus my emotions. And I have more emotions. Now, I will say I have by far more emotions in that game. And when I say emotions, I'm not talking about like I'm throwing lampshades across the room or anything like that, like internal emotions. Now, when I was 20 years old, did I punch a hole through a lampshade? Yes. Did I throw a spoon and chip a television? Yes. I did all sorts of crazy things when I was 15 or 20 years old, watching Ohio State Michigan games. I hated Michigan, and this was the most important game to me. It's still the most important game, but it's been reduced like 98%. So I'm running a business. I watch the game. It hits me. I had no thought. If Ohio State would have won that game, I probably wouldn't have done post game. I'm almost counterintuitive that way. Like, people usually people are kind of cowardice and run from criticism and difficulty, like online, where I kind of run to it. And so I thought when Ohio State was blowing this game, well, I'm going to go live. I decided with about 2 minutes left, they're losing this game because Michigan's obviously just setting up for a field goal and they can't miss. So Ohio State's losing this game. You know what? I'm going to go live. So anyway, I didn't intend on going live. But in terms of, that's a great question. Like, I thought from the first play of the game, the Michigan had a legitimate chance to win the game. So, but I still thought Ohio State's a better team. They should win the game. Yeah. Now, when Khalil Mullings made that run, that's when I thought the game was over. The game is over right there. He made the run. They're in field goal range. Ohio State can't do anything about this except as long as they protect the ball, the game's over. That's when I knew the game was over. Like, I was 99% sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, as it started to creep into the third quarter, when Ohio State tied the score at 10, I thought, well, okay, maybe they're going to kick it into gear here. Maybe they caught their formula. They got pressed into a 90-second situation at the end of the first half, and I thought, well, there's their blueprint. Kick it up a notch. Move. Get some tempo going. Throw the ball. Throw it. This is what you should be doing. Go. But they didn't do that. They didn't keep that up in the second half. So, yeah, I guess it was just kind of a slow grind of.
Yeah, that makes sense. It definitely was probably one of the most stressful games I've ever watched because, my mindset going into it was, Michigan really doesn't have a chance because they don't have a quarterback. They don't have a passing game. And it's even more wild is when you learn Colston Loveland's out, Will Johnson's out. Obviously, Rod Moore didn't come back. You just think there's no chance. But it's interesting because early on in the game, I'm calm because I'm thinking, I'm going to watch the game, but Michigan's going to lose it. I'm going to not get my hopes up. But at some point in a game, it turns into a situation where all that flips. You're like, okay, we can't we're in this position. We can't let this slip away. And then your expectations go up and then the stress goes through the roof. And that was, I got to be honest, when Davis Warren, when they called that trick play, was it a bad call? No. But you have a quarterback who has been prone to throwing interceptions. It's first and goal, I believe, on the Ohio State 4. I still would like to hand the ball off. You should be able to. That's the safe way to go. I think they would have scored a touchdown there if they would have just ran it. But it was true. I think Hogan Hansen, it was wide open, and Davis Warren didn't get him the ball. But after that, I was like, there's too much momentum that's going to shift over to Ohio State, and Michigan's going to lose this thing, and that ended up not happening. And then that Khalil Mullings run, I was hearing some people have kind of said oh, that was a lucky run and everything. It was a fortunate run with what happened with the Ohio State defenders, not just kind of slipping and not getting a great. He just slipped out of their grasp. But I will say, it's less lucky because that's how Khalil Mullings runs. If you think about it, he's kind of prepared all year for that type of event to happen to stay up. We saw it happen with USC. He's just a guy who's constantly going to work to not go down, and do that over and over just in case a defender misses or slips.
So I don't want to take any credit away from Khalil Mullings. I thought the run that he made against USC was a lot more impressive because he actually trucked somebody and just ran right through. Mm-hmm. At least he completely just trucked. I think it was Kamari Ramsey of USC.
It was beast mode.
Stepped on his face mask, basically. And then there were two guys that had a shot at him, and they kind of just got barely his hip. And he just kind of ran through them too. They didn't get a real good shot, but they touched him, and then he was gone. They tracked him down, but he was basically, ripped off a 65-yarder. This is one of these runs that when I watch it live, it looks incredible because you just see this mash of humanity, and you figure this guy's stuff, plays over, and then all of a sudden he pops out. But when they show the replay, and especially from behind the line of scrimmage, I'm less impressed by it just because like Ohio State defenders were there, but they were all being blocked and they're just forming like a wall, but they're not wrapping him up. They're not grabbing him.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's just bouncing off guys that are being blocked and bouncing off this wall and taking it outside. You tend to see that fairly often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess basically what I'm saying is it's just not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. That was so lucky. That definitely
Well, it wasn't lucky.
Like he's that type of running back. If you don't wrap him up and have a firm handle on him, and even then, maybe you won't get him down. Like he's gonna break one.
Yeah, Michigan in no way was lucky in this game. I don't think they're as good a team. I think the season proves that, but that doesn't mean they're lucky. They were the better team on that day. They're not a better team. Ohio State's a better team. That's obvious. Nobody that has half a brain would argue that, but Michigan played better and won the game. They weren't lucky. They didn't get any crazy calls, nothing. They just won the game.
And I'll have to go back, and this will definitely be a game I rewatch just because of the things that were happening in this game. I was like, only in Ohio State, Michigan. I never want to hear from anyone else again that there's a rivalry that compares. I know people want to think that, and I'm definitely biased, so I get that. But this game is just different.
Now, let me say something real quick. Missing field goals for the team that benefits from that, you could call that luck, but the other team needs to have a field goal kicker that's good enough to make field goals. But Michigan did nothing to force. They didn't block the field goal. It's almost like turnovers. I look at turnovers differently. I look at each one differently because sometimes they're just gifts. Jack Sawyer got a gift. He had to catch the ball. He made a nice play, but it was a gift. But then there are other turnovers when if you've got a dominant speed rusher and he is just whipping a left tackle over and over and over, and then he, of course, gets around the end and knocks the ball free and gets a strip sack. Well, that's a great play. That's not, we turned the ball over, that's why we lost. No, your left tackle's not good enough, and they got a great pass rusher who beat him 15 times and got a strip sack. That's so I look at turnovers a little, look at each one differently.
Yeah.
In terms of credit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I agree with that. Can you explain why they didn't, from what I heard, maybe I'm wrong about this, but from what I heard, it's they didn't target Jeremiah Smith at all in the second half?
I'd have to watch the game. Our buddy John D'Adamo is saying that Jeremiah Smith had all sorts of referee. Okay, so I did a live update at halftime, and that was right after Jeremiah Smith scored that touchdown, and Michigan fans were all enraged that was offensive pass interference. Well, they need to go look at a rule book because a receiver he can run his route. And if somebody's in his way, he can run right over them and step on their face mask if he wants to. He's running a route. And it's on the defensive player to not impede his progress. So Jeremiah Smith running a route to score that touchdown and just bull rushing he didn't extend his arms, bull rushing the defender, that's perfectly legal.
Yeah, that's
anyway,
fair. There was some
back to your point. Sorry to interject there.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, I didn't have a huge. At first, I had a big issue with it when I first saw it, but after I saw the replay, I didn't have as much of an issue with it. It was, I don't know. They were letting some things go. It wasn't. I wouldn't say there were any horrible calls, but it wasn't the most consistent. But I mean, I just don't even care about the refs unless it's egregious at this point. I've lost all faith in them being consistently competent because they're not real professionals.
Well, the reason why that's a good approach is because a lot of people are going to get so invested in their team, they're going to think that the officials are against their team. But if you just watch college football all day, the pass interference calls are all over the map in every game.
Well, and even more so, we've seen the refs reverse calls that they had no real authority reversing just based on crowd reactions this year. Like really bizarre. I don't even know. I you know how I feel about the refs. I've commented how I feel about the refs. I'm not going to take them seriously until college football takes them seriously
Yeah.
and makes them full time. Because at that point, you're just not you're not a serious factor, and I think it's ridiculous, and I don't really want to waste time on it. So, but yeah, as far as the post game skirmish, I thought Gus Johnson was a little ridiculous. If I was Michigan, I'd ban him from Ann Arbor because I just think he's a dishonest guy at this point. He's apparently is a closet Michigan fan, but he goes overboard, I think, consistently taking jabs at Michigan, and he's been doing it for years. I try to ignore it, but like, I just think it's dishonest. You can be neutral and not try to make the audience perceive you as something you're not. Like, you can just be a straight up professional. You don't need to say, oh, they didn't cheat this time. Like, why? That's not a compliment. Like, that's in the past. Like, I get it. And then he's talking about I don't know, just being a little bit too virtuous, I think, for the flag planting. We've seen that. Texas did it to Michigan earlier this year.
Yeah.
No one freaked out about it like it happens. Baker Mayfield did it to Ohio State.
Yeah.
The way I view it is it's like these are two teams. It's heated. It was probably one of the most emotional games up and down, as emotional as it was for fans. I can only imagine how the players felt, especially when you have Ohio State players who a bunch of them came back to win this game and they didn't. Like, you just have two teams in that situation where neither of them took the high road. So, and that's unfortunate.
Well, that's true.
So, but I just don't understand, like, my perspective. I like, if it was my team, I wouldn't want them planning flag or doing any of that stuff after the game because it's just inflammatory and the game is over. I understand being emotional and whatnot, but just get back to the locker room. You're in hostile territory. I don't understand why they let teams linger as much as they do on the field. Some people would say, well, they might know players on the other. Okay, fine. Make plans with your friends after the game. Like, just get back to your locker room. It's not a big deal. And then all this doesn't matter. And then we don't have the ridiculous scene of super undersized cops macing everybody. Like,
All right. Nick, I appreciate your take, and you have a lot of great points. I'm just trying to hit the road here, and we got a couple of calls, and I don't even know if I'm going to take them because the intent is to wrap up at 1:00.
Oh, okay.
So no, I appreciate everything you said. I don't disagree with it, and I could reiterate everything that I said after the game, much of which was disagreed by Michigan fans, but I don't think they really listened to everything I had to say. So I don't condone either side in this. And at the point that I made the comment after the game, I was setting up for this. Like, zeros went on the clock and I started setting up. So I merely had a window open on my laptop listening to this skirmish. I didn't watch it. I clicked back a couple times to that window to see what's going on. And all I saw was a massive humanity on the field from a wide shot. So I wasn't getting any information of what was really happening. So for me, it's clownish and dumb and punkish to plan a flag or have some kind of demonstration on somebody's field. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not the end of the world. They're a bunch of 20-year-olds, and they'll hopefully learn and grow up and be better. But that's fine. They're 20-year-olds. So I'm not going to condemn them, but I am going to call them punks and going to call them, immature and so forth. But that doesn't mean that they're the only immature football players on the planet. Like you say, this is being done all over the place. So it's not a target or an indictment on Michigan. It's an indictment on really all of the players. And as you eloquently stated, the system and the structure of the post-game logistics. So maybe somebody should take care of that. Again, I would like players I would like there to be just a true spontaneous celebration. It's like watching all these ridiculous touchdown dances and everything, and this whole genre of getting your picture taken. Everybody coming off the sideline and like 48 players standing in the end zone because they're taking a selfie. Just really,
Yeah. I
it's
agree.
just stupid and moronic. It's to me, it's an indictment on society that we're not raising real men. We're raising guys that have a false vibrato, a false sense of self and manhood, unfortunately. So
Well,
anyway, Nick, I appreciate the call.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day. And I certainly want to honor these 2 calls because they've been waiting, but I'm going to give you like a minute and you can say whatever you want for the next minute. And the floor is yours.
I'll make it quick, Mark. I love listening to the show.
Thank you.
It's really awesome right now because I start out my Friday night defending Coach Ferentz a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Now, if he resigned, I would not be upset. You understand?
Yes, I understand that.
But when you start out a season, no different what you have with your Ohio State callers, not everything goes perfect the whole season like you want. For example, I mean, you can hack on Ferentz all you want, but at least they did try to go get Cade for a quarterback. It didn't work out, but they tried. They went and got Sullivan. He gets hurt. I mean, it isn't that organization isn't trying. But I really do enjoy this season because Ohio State wants to get rid of their coach. Michigan doesn't like their coach. Alabama's ready to bail on their coach. And USC, they're in disarray. Wisconsin's new coaching hire isn't panning out. And it just sounds good for once, some of these schools, I see here in the
I wonder if Michigan fans, not to cut you off, I wonder if Michigan fans, are they happy with their 7-5 season? They're keeping their coach. They went 7-5.
Well, I haven't heard much, and we played our annual card game last night, so I haven't listened to your show last night, all of it. Well, I did listen to a little bit of it, but I haven't heard much out of Michigan fans after the win, gloating or anything. Okay.
And that's fine.
Are they happy with their coach now?
What's funny is on Twitter, I had a handful of Michigan fans who DM'd me just with like laughing emojis. Like, I just can't relate to an existence where I get off on sending like Michigan fans emojis laughing after Ohio State beat Michigan. Like, what do I care? Like, I just can't relate to that level of psyche that I'm going to rub it in by sending laughing emojis to people. It's just so stupid.
Well, and I did listen to you and Darrell last night. I did get that clip. He was just a little bit overboard, on Coach of Ohio day. I mean, like you say, it takes time. I like your references back to the Nebraska coaches and coaches of the past. You just don't do it overnight. It's no different than when you start out with a family and buy your first house, and there's struggles along the way. And football teams are that way too. And even if you walk into a program that's top notch, it's probably even harder there. Obviously. So I just wanted to let you know I really enjoy listening to everybody so disappointed. I mean, and the other one quick thing I was wanting to call you before on is I don't want to get Darrell fired up, and I'm not saying that the SEC isn't better. So, like, if you would take the top 4 teams out of the Big Ten and place them against the top 4 teams in the SEC by standings, I'm not saying that the SEC wouldn't win all 4 of them games, but I think that gap is narrower between the 2 conferences.
I agree. And I said the same thing last night in a different way. I said, if you took the top 4 teams in the SEC and the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, I would not be surprised in the outcomes of those games, meaning if it went 4-zip, I would only be surprised if they were like blowouts. If the SEC
Right.
won all 4 and they won them by 30 points, that would be a shocker, or vice versa. But if it finished 3-1 or 1-3 or 2-2 or 4-zip one way, none of that would surprise me. I am extremely confident that the SEC is better from about 5 on down.
Right. I was looking at the standings of each conference, and there's 6 teams, 5-3 in the SEC, I think, and
Yeah, that sounds right.
it would be nice if they had 9 games so you could kind of compare them, but
Yeah.
it all depends who each. Obviously, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the one thing we
But,
know about both conferences is if you add up those wins and losses, they are the exact same number.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
But it looked like there's more losses at the bottom of the Big Ten. I mean, there's more teams with
gotcha. More horrible teams.
that are under
Yeah.
4-4. How's that?
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
I will let you go, but thanks for hanging on here.
Well, I appreciate it.
We'll tune in.
Yeah. Have a good day. Thanks. All right. Then we got RTR. Appreciate you being here. You're it today. So give us your best here for a minute or so.
For a minute?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm an SEC guy. I think the top 4 of the Big Ten would beat the top, and overall would beat the top 4 of the SEC.
Well, that's very that's a very gracious comment to make as an SEC fan.
Yeah. I only wanted to make one comment, was that someone earlier said was like, oh, no rivalry compares to the Michigan Ohio State game. Which
Well, he
I think
also said that he's biased. He also made that comment that he's biased. So just to be clear, but go ahead.
Well, all I was gonna say is, I think in the past 10 years it has been the biggest game for sure. But I do remember a time when the Iron Bowl really meant something, where there was like a few year span where the winner of the Iron Bowl basically went to the championship game. And if you looked, and I looked at this, I did it a while ago, but I think from like 2009 to like 2014, like the viewership numbers were higher. But I think also, and yeah, I think right now the Michigan Ohio State is the biggest one. That's the one that draws more attention. It's a very heated rivalry. I think the only 2 rivalries that separate themselves is Iron Bowl and what is it, the game they call it? Yeah. So I just want to say, just put respect on the Iron Bowl, because the way, at least from someone who lives in I live in the Midwest now, but someone who also lived in the South, people also go crazy. They're like very crazy about college football, especially when you're in states that don't have NFL teams.
Yep.
And are from poor states that don't really have much. Like where I grew up, for example, that's all people cared about was football. No basketball, no other sports. That was just their lives. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, there's no question about it. I was down in Alabama and Mississippi for 7 years covering Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. I was at the games every week. I was there talking to coaches and players most days, and going to all the news conferences and everything, and involved in the recruiting and everything. So I totally get what you're saying, especially these states with no professional teams. Yes, I totally agree. That's what they live for.
Okay, well, that's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
All right, goodbye.
All right, folks, we've got an Ole Miss channel. Please check it out. That's what it looks like right there. You can just look up Ole Miss at the Voice of College Football, and I will put the link in the chat. And if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please just subscribe to the channel, even if you could care less about Ole Miss football, which I'm guessing most of you are in that boat. Well, we do have an Ole Miss show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Leanne Herring and Ruby Dreher and myself, and it's a venture that we believe in. So we are pushing the Ole Miss content out And so please check us out right there. And again, we'll drop the link in the chat. If you don't care about Ole Miss, what you're doing is helping the voice of college football. And once we get to a certain point, then just unsubscribe. And that point would be 1,000 subscribers, because YouTube takes channels with 1,000 subscribers seriously, meaning they push the content out and they put it into traffic. When you've proven that you've built a fan base of some level, some degree of 1,000. So please subscribe to our Ole Miss channel. And again, if you've got any interest in the Ole Miss Rebels, the SEC, or just are a college football fan, please check out our show on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And Wednesday, by the way, is National Signing Day. So I'm going to be just working nonstop on Wednesday and every day, but certainly on Wednesday, producing content and live streams on National Signing Day. And I would guess that that will be a day in which Ohio State will have a much better recruiting class than Michigan, and Michigan fans will laugh at Ohio State fans because they just won the game. So it's not going to matter what the recruiting rankings are. So that will be funny to observe. So both fan bases certainly have their talking points. And the one thing that I said during the offseason that seemed to stop a lot of people in their tracks, if you're honest with yourself. If you're not honest, then you can talk around anything if you're not being honest. But I guarantee for any Michigan fan, if we could snap our fingers and you would be given Ohio State's history, then you would argue that you had the greatest football history. And for any Ohio State fan who currently believes, as I do, that they have the greater football history, certainly if we snapped our fingers and Ohio State fans were given Michigan's football history, then we would ignore the blemishes and we would talk up the major points of the other team's history. So you're all biased. I'm biased. That's part of being a human being. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please subscribe to our Ole Miss channel. Please check out my book, Disputed National Champions. Oh, I don't have it here. Anyway, I thought I had the tab to show you the link on Amazon, but the link is in the description section of this video and all the videos. So Disputed National Champions, Michigan fans, you get talked about a lot in like 1991, 92, 90, 91, 92, 97, of course. So I think you'll enjoy the book. $9.99 on Amazon, Disputed National Champions. Right, folks, appreciate you being here. I have made a list of all sorts of things that I'm going to be working on. People seem to like my college football playoff rankings predictor, so I will predict what the committee is going to select on Tuesday. We'll try to get to power rankings in all the conferences. Do I put Penn State above Ohio State since they only have one loss, or do I keep Ohio State above Penn State? Does it matter? It doesn't matter. It's just fun. We got a bottom 10 that we could produce. Ryan Day may find himself in the bottom 10. I think very, very high on the bottom 10 or very low on the bottom 10. I don't know which would be worse. Ryan Day, Miami, they deserve to be in the bottom 10. They had the ACC championship game on a silver platter right in front of them, and they blew it. Yes, there are others out there. A common opponents breakdown. Got Penn State and Oregon, SMU, Clemson, Georgia, Texas, obviously is a rematch, Arizona State and Iowa State. A lot of common opponents. Interesting to look at that. The top 25, that actually makes sense. I haven't even worked on that at all. So there we go. And more. And more. We're going to, of course, preview all the championship games this weekend. And so be looking out for those videos as well. We've got a watch party for the college football playoff rankings. Going to be fascinating. How far does Ohio State drop? How far does Miami drop? Does South Carolina jump Ole Miss into Alabama, even though they lost to them head-to-head and have the same record? A lot of fascinating details there. How much does Arizona State jump as well as Iowa State? College football playoff rankings unveiling on Tuesday. We got a watch party right here, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll see you then.